For my presentation, I read the book Futurewise by David Perkins, who is a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and one of the co-founders of Project Zero. This book seeks to answer the question, what is worth learning in a changing world? Perkins contends that our minds are only going to hold on to the information that we actually use, whether that's in our careers or our personal lives. And so we need to move beyond just teaching kids what we think is good to know and really think about what is going to be essential, or as he calls it, life-worthy. Learning that's likely to matter to the lives that learners are likely to lead. He compares knowledge to a bicycle. Knowledge is only useful to the extent that it helps you get somewhere. And curriculum seems to suffer from what he calls a crowded garage effect, where it generally seems safer and easier to keep an old rusty bicycle around than to throw it out. He talks about three competing agendas in education. One being achievement, where test scores rule. And although there are some worthy aspects to this, like measuring early numeracy and literacy outcomes, a lot of the content measured by achievement tests is not what he would call life-worthy. There's also an information agenda, which seeks to contend that students need to learn lots and lots of information to be prepared for the world. While building schema is important, we cannot forget that most adults now have supercomputers at their fingertips, and so things like memorizing capitals no longer have the use that they once did. Another agenda is the one of building expertise. Perkins contends that while students will likely develop expertise in certain areas as they progress in their lives, we should seek to teach them junior versions of different disciplines rather than loading them up with technical content that they're not likely to use in their lives. For example, in the discipline of mathematics, we often spend a lot of time helping students build technical knowledge that they rightly complain they will not use later in their lives. But then we see that the general population is unable to interpret things like quadratic equations modeling growth. He contends that a wiser mathematics curriculum would help people interpret mathematical modeling and information in ways that would empower them to be better citizens of the world. He argues that curriculum must focus on depth using techniques such as smart sampling. And rather than trying to cover a broad array of good-to-know ideas, it should choose a few good exemplars and help students build big understandings that they can apply to situations in their lives. A good curriculum, he argues, focuses on big questions, things that are relevant to learners and that they're interested in. Some big questions might be why? What's going on here? What makes you say that? What's the real problem? And what if not? Techniques such as the Socratic method are a classic version of this. And he believes that living questions, ones that learners find genuinely at issue and worth engaging with, often called through lines, essential questions, and themes of inquiry, are important ones for linking learners to the curriculum. He defines what is worth learning as life-ready learning. And this means learning that can surface in a moment of opportunity. There are many situations in which we might have a good deal of knowledge, but for whatever reason, we are unable to apply it to a complex situation. For example, does your understanding of democracy help you interpret a newspaper story which suggests a government is veering toward autocracy? If not, then what you have learned about democracy would not be life-ready. Life-ready learning helps prepare learners to actually apply their concepts in situations that require them. But this takes a long process. This requires that students construct their understanding and have opportunities to apply, to notice, and to genuinely care. They must think with a topic. For example, thinking about how geography has shaped outcomes for a population, rather than just being able to name local mountains. He argues that education must build a better bucket system. Disciplines are important because they keep things in order. They maintain areas of learning over many years of education and draw learners into fundamental bundles of knowledge. Each discipline represents a particular way of knowing that is important for learners to understand. However, rather than burdening learners with tons of technical content, we must consider ways of renewing and reframing the disciplines. How can we help them identify the parts of a discipline which are most likely to come up in their lives? This must involve interdisciplinary learning and looking at multiple ways of knowing in order to construct a deeper understanding of a situation. For example, he cites a debate that happened at Harvard about the nature of crime and guilt. One person, a legal scholar, said that crime occurs anytime there is a creation of undue risk, for example, in drunken driving. Another perspective came from an evolutionary psychologist who argued that our feelings of guilt are often associated with a poor outcome and that our intuition must be listened to. Obviously, either of these perspectives taken into an extreme might be a legal justice system we may not want to live in, and point to the importance of applying multiple disciplines to understanding a problem. What is most important about disciplines, he argues, is that learners learn to adopt their ways of knowing. So rather than just understanding the surface facts that resulted from the disciplines, they have a deep understanding of the process and the way of knowing that each discipline entails. For example, how do I apply Euclidean logic or look at Bacon's scientific method to apply it to problems that might surface in my life? He proposes that future-ready learning involves a new bucket system, that familiar disciplines will need to be renewed with recent advances in emerging disciplines like evolutionary psychology. And we must also consider cross-topics, interdisciplinary themes, for example, the persistence of poverty, and looking at ways that different disciplines can offer answers and questions. He does note that a good bucket system does not guarantee a good learning outcome. That will be determined by the process. But contemporary themes, connections to personal and community concerns, and big questions in the foreground will help to stimulate thoughtful engagement in teaching and learning. In addition, teachers are now being asked to teach learners about 21st century skills and competencies. Many of these are strongly attitudinal, things such as creativity and self-management. He argues that selectivity will be essential here as well, and that we look for ways to infuse these skills into our curriculum. For example, citizenship is not very meaningful as a standalone subject, but infused into a social studies or humanities course, learners could be involved in projects where they look for examples of civic participation in the school, interview their parents about what civic participation means to them, and consider the different perspectives that are revealed, ranging from cynical non-participation to ardent activism, that they can shadow individuals who are particularly active in their community and discuss to develop deeper understandings. None of the 21st century skills, he argues, are successful taught alone. Ultimately, Perkins argues that the goal must be to cultivate the capacity for wise actions in our students, that they have a deep appreciation for the way the human world works and can look at it from a multitude of perspectives, that they can balance different factors that will bear on a situation and remove their own egos and agendas to make wise decisions. Ends his book with this painting of two blind men crossing a log. It shows two men who, instead of strolling boldly across the log, are going slowly, probing, testing, and getting a sense of shape and direction. He likens this to today's situation education. We do not know what the future will call for in our students. We may have some sense, but we do not know the full answer. Instead, as we seek to discover what is worth learning, we must go forth slowly, probing, putting full confidence aside, and instead proceeding thoughtfully and with care.